ZilckSound.
You're tuned into ZilckSound, where business gets real, trends get broken down, and you walk away sharper than when you hit play. Brought to you by Zilck.com. Practical news for the modern entrepreneur. Now, here's your host, Rob Henley.
Welcome to ZilckSound. I'm Rob Henley. Thank you for joining. This is episode 4 of the podcast. Today, I want to ask you something before we get into it. When was the last time you did something slowly? Not because you had to, but because the slowness was the point, okay? When was the last time you made something that couldn't be templated, automated, or repurposed into a content strategy? When was the last time you were just inefficient on purpose? If you had to think about that for more than a few seconds, this episode is for you. There's a phrase that's everywhere in 2026. You've heard it: scale faster, scale leaner, scale smarter. And on its surface, it sounds very reasonable, even obvious. Of course, you want to grow. Of course, you want your output to compound. That's the logic of every business book ever written, every accelerator pitch, every LinkedIn post from someone who just had their best quarter. But somewhere between the logic and the execution, something gets lost. And what gets lost is you. Have you thought about it? Maybe not. Here's what the hyper-growth model actually does when you run it at full speed. It turns the person building the thing into an input, not a founder, not a creator, not a human being, with a specific way of seeing the world. An input, one variable among several. The digital treadmill is real. And the cruelest thing about it is that it feels like momentum. You're moving, you're producing. The dashboard says you're growing. And somewhere in the middle of all that forward motion, you stop asking whether the direction is right, because asking that question would require you to slow down. And slowing down feels like falling behind. That's not growth. That's just speed with a different name. The psychological cost of this, and I want to be specific about this because it gets glossed over, is not burnout in the traditional sense. It's something quieter. It's the gradual flattening of your creative instinct, the slow erosion of the conviction that your specific perspective on the world has value, because the algorithm doesn't reward specificity. It rewards volume. And you start producing for the algorithm, and the algorithm doesn't know you. It never did. Let me describe something you may have already experienced. You find a tool or a workflow or a system that genuinely saves you time, real time, an hour a day, maybe more. And for a while, that's just good. You use the time you've recovered to do more of the work that matters. And then gradually, almost imperceptibly, the workflow starts making decisions for you. Not big decisions, small ones. The kind of decisions that feel trivial until you realize they're the decisions that used to define your voice. The specific word choice you'd have agonized over for 10 minutes, the structural instinct that would have made a piece of writing yours and not anyone else's. The creative friction was annoying, slow, and irreplaceable. The machine removed the friction, and the friction was the fingerprint. This is what I mean by the efficiency trap. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't arrive as a hostile takeover. It arrives as convenience, and it is very good at making it feel like progress right up until the moment you produce something and realize you don't recognize yourself in it. There's a concept I keep coming back to: invisible optimization. The idea that automated systems don't just optimize your output, they improve your behavior, they reward certain patterns and ignore others. And over time, you begin to follow patterns that get rewarded. Not because you decided to, because the system made it frictionless. You didn't choose to sound like everyone else. The workflow nudged you there one small efficiency at a time. And then there's the deeper problem, what I'd call the point of diminishing returns on efficiency. There is a threshold, and most of us have crossed it without noticing, where optimization stops saving you time and starts cannibalizing your sense of purpose. Where the question is no longer, how do I do this faster, but why am I doing this at all? And the system has no answer for that. It was never designed to. So where's the line? That's the question I keep getting, and I'll be honest, it's the question I keep asking myself. Where does useful automation end and identity loss begin? I don't think there's a universal answer, but I think there's a useful framework for finding your personal one. Start by sorting your tasks into 2 categories, not by how long they take and not by how much they pay. Sort them by this. Does this task require my specific experience? The things that require your specific experience of being alive, your history, your perspective, your way of processing contradiction, those belong to the soul. They are, by definition, unscalable. Not because you can't produce them at volume, but because their value is inseparable from their origin. They are worth less when they come from anywhere but you. The things that don't require that, the scheduling, the formatting, the distribution, the administrative layer of your work, those belong to the processor. Let the processor have them. That's not a compromise. That's clarity. Now, I want to spend a moment on what I'd call the unscalable essence. It's the part of your work that an AI can approximate but cannot replicate. Not because the technology isn't sophisticated enough. In some cases, it's extraordinarily sophisticated, but because the value of those things is grounded in their human source. The empathy in a difficult conversation, the courage in an uncomfortable opinion, the specific way you've learned to fail, and what that's done to how you build, these aren't inputs. These are the thing itself. And the moment you hand them to a system, even a very good system, you've replaced the signal with a very convincing echo. Define your red line, not as a policy, not as a rule you announce publicly, but as a private commitment to yourself about where the automation stops. The specific territory that stays yours, the work that you will not systematize, regardless of how much time it costs you. Because that territory, the slow, inefficient, irreplaceable corner of your work, that's where you actually live. Hold on, here's something practical. Take your last 5 pieces of output, writing, decisions, products, whatever the unit of work is for you, and ask 3 questions about each one. First, would this exist without me, or would something indistinguishable from it exist without me? Second, does this reflect a value I actually hold or a format the platform rewards? Third, if I remove my name from this, is there anything left that points back to a specific human being with a specific way of seeing? That's the audit. It's uncomfortable. I've done it. The results are not always flattering, but the discomfort is information. If most of your recent output could have been produced by a reasonably well-prompted model, that's not a judgment on your worth. It's a signal that the workflow has drifted further than you realized. And now you know it. There's also something I want to say about intentional inefficiency, because I think it's been framed as nostalgia or contrarianism, and it's neither. Intentional inefficiency is a form of resistance. It's the deliberate choice to do something the slow way, because it's the only way to get the result that matters. It's the decision to write the paragraph from scratch again, rather than edit what the system generated. It's the hour you spend thinking without producing anything. It's the conversation you have without an agenda. These are not productivity failures. They are the practice of remaining a person. I want to close with something that's been sitting with me for a while. We are in the first period in human history where the capacity to produce has radically outpaced the capacity to mean anything by it. We can generate more content, more data, more output than any previous generation. And we are, in many measurable ways, saying less. The metrics look extraordinary. The resonance is thin. And I think the reason is this. We've optimized for reach before depth. We've scaled the surface while the interior quietly empties out. And the audience, the human beings on the other end, can feel it. Even when they can't articulate it, they can tell when something was made for them and when something was made for the algorithm that was supposed to reach them. The difference is not technical, it's human. So here's what I want to propose, not as a framework, not as a system, but as a reorientation. Protect the quiet spaces, the non-linear hours, the parts of your process that look like nothing from the outside because nothing is happening yet, the thinking that precedes the work, the wondering that has no deliverable. Those spaces are not inefficiencies to be optimized. They are the conditions under which original thought is possible. Kill them and you will keep producing, but you will produce at the surface indefinitely. Let's redefine what success means to us in this era. Not as a rejection of growth. Growth is real and worth wanting, but as an expansion of the metrics that count. Resonance counts. Depth counts. The email from one person who says, I don't know how you describe my situation. So exactly that counts. Not instead of scale, but alongside it. And when the two are in conflict, knowing which one you're willing to sacrifice. The technology is not the enemy. I want to be clear about that because this episode could be misread as a reactionary argument, and it isn't. The tools are extraordinary, what they can do for human work, genuinely amplifying it, extending its reach, reducing the friction that has nothing to do with your creative core that's real and worth using. But there is a version of that future and a version of you in it where technology amplifies your humanity rather than replaces it, where the machine does the work that doesn't require you to be you, and you do the work that does. That version is still available. But you have to choose it deliberately because the default, if you don't, is the other one. The one where the treadmill keeps running, the output keeps compounding, and somewhere around the third year, you look up and realize the most efficient version of your business has very little of you left in it. That's the ethics of exponential growth. Not a policy question, not a regulatory debate, a personal one. That's all for now. I'll be back at the desk next week, and thank you for joining. This is ZilckSound.
ZilckSound. ZilckSound.